Right, this is just a little sort of recap or something, because I made a childish schoolboy type error and I forgot to put this washer on here. Now, in the earlier videos I actually worked it out when I played it back and I put it back on again, so don't worry about that, I did put it back on. But I just want to say to you that this is one of the problems when you take complicated things apart like this. It's sometimes a nightmare finding out what you want, because there's a procedure you have to go through. First of all, you've got to strip it down, you've got to find out the bits you want and then order the bits. Well, of course, being over here and we were looking for this this piece here, well, that took a long time to get here. By the time I get round to doing it, bits get all over the bench and it's quite difficult to pick up where you left off, because when you assemble, you want to assemble it all at the same time. So this was stripped down about 7 weeks ago and we had to order the parts, and because this this yoke thing, you know, whatever you want to call it, was difficult to find, well, you tend to forget a few bits and pieces. Anyway, it wasn't so much that there was the problem. I had to take it apart again anyway, because I inadvertently turned this shaft here, the selector shaft. You see how it sort of moves like this? Well, you can see on the video I'll put in now. So with the cover off, maybe now you can see my dilemma. This pin should be in that groove up there. It's jumped out when I pulled it. It's jumped out. I moved it down to the bottom and it had come out of sync, because when I was lifting it and taking it off, on and off the stand to do the shims, I'd knocked it out of sync. My bad. So the procedure should be is get it in, get it cleaned, get it in, get it cleaned up on the outside, strip it down, make a note of the bits you want, order the bits and put them back on again. But this has taken nearly 7 weeks to get to this stage, and it's been stripped for 7 weeks. And if it's not fresh in your mind, you can miss bits, like that washer for example. But like I said, when this went out of sync, I had to strip it down anyway, so it went wrong. So what else went wrong? Well, of course, once I'd taken it to pieces to put this back in together, I got that resynced without taking the gearbox off. All I had to do was take out the reverse here, push the pin up and relocate it in its slot. There's no big deal. The problem was I had to put another gasket on here. No big deal for that either. Got loads of them. The problem was it was a different thickness gasket to the one supplied in the kit. So that meant all my shims were a different size now. So I've had to recalculate it all again. So I got JP off his deathbed, well, off his flu bed or wherever, he wasn't very well, and he remade me all the shims again, and he made me, see if I can get them out. Well, I can't get it out with one stuck in, but he made me 3 shims to go for the lay shaft in increments. So I calculated one size and I made one a bit smaller and a bit bigger, and it's a good thing I did too, because now the gasket's thinner. That meant I needed a thinner washer. Now you've only got, let's see, it's 0.025 millimeters preload or looseness in this shaft here. So you've got 1 thou either, so you've got 0.025 this way or this way play in the lay shaft. It's not much, it's 1/1000 of an inch, and I had it absolutely spot on and put another gasket on, and then they were all out again. So it's not a big deal, but it's things you have to keep going back on, if you see what I mean, because you don't want these. You see, this lay shaft, this main shaft here should have no preload on it, so that it's quite crucial for the settings. You're given 0 tolerance on it. I don't know why that is, But just be wary when you're starting to messing about with these things. I mean, this stage is easy, you know, it's just the setting up that's the problem. So that's just a bit of a preamble as to where I am now. I'm going to fit another gasket on here, oil this all up again, and make sure that I don't touch this shaft when I take it out. The reason for that is when you get a R380, which I do 90% of the work is R380s, it has this arrangement, but it doesn't have this reverse bits and pieces in. You see, I think that's what threw me. So let's get back onto it. Let's put the cover back on. Seen that, and see if we can re-shim this back up again and see if there was any changes. Because we've got to shim it up to compensate for the gasket thickness, I've started again. I've put 2 smaller shims in than I think I need. We're going to flip it over and measure the tolerances now. On the R380 it didn't have a gasket, it was just silicone, which was good, that was easy. But the problem, well, it was RTV. But the bad thing about the R380 was the shims were actually in this plate at the bottom. So you had to sort of put it together and then take it to bits and put it back together again. Whereas this, you've only got the end cover, you know, this cover here for the bearing support. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that back on. I'm going to put it on very carefully so we don't damage the seal with the spline. Line it up. Pop our bolts back in. Now we are going to put all 6 bolts in there just to make sure it's nice and tightened down, and then flip it over again, because now it's a matter of flipping it this way, flipping it that way, and I did it on the floor before to show you, but it's the same principle, but I'm going to show you what the end results are, hopefully. Right, I think this is take 17. I've got my little plastic cap on the gauge here. I'm going to zero it. I'm going to turn the shaft. I've already settled the bearings down by turning it a few times, but you can see the gauge doesn't move. Next thing, and I've put the gauge smack bang in the middle of the cap. If you put it on the edge of the cap, it'll twist. They say you should put a ball bearing in there, but, well, you could do, but I don't know, I like this way better. Now what I've done, I'll explain for the 7th time. I keep getting it wrong. Well, I keep getting what I want to say wrong. I've taken the original shims out we did on the previous video, which we had very, very close. And I've found some shims in the box that are a little bit smaller. So I'm going to work in thousandths of an inch because my gauge is in thousandths of an inch, and it's a lot easier numbers to work with when you're doing small stuff. I mean, if you were building a ship, 1,000 millimetres is no good. You want big measurements. Right, this is that ramble. Right, so I'm going to lift up the shaft, and that is exactly 7/1000 of an inch. Write it down. I've wrote it down on the box already because I've already measured it. So we need to add to the small shim, when we take it out, 7/1000 of an inch. You see, because when you start getting out 0.25, blah 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 blah, it gets a bit complicated. But 7/1000 is easy to work out. So that's that one, and I'm going to do exactly the same to the main shaft here. Right. I changed my idea for putting this cap on because the shaft of the gauge kept dropping into this hole here. I'll need to make another one that's flush. So what I did was I put a ball bearing in the top. See, there's a ball bearing there, and the idea of that is that as it's going round, it doesn't matter if it's just not on the centre, it will, as the shaft's going round, it'll still find its same place. And they are tricky to do. I mean, let's zoom out again. So see, there we are. See, but there you get that 1 thou. Yeah, you get that 1 thou difference. It's really the most frustrating, you know, to get it accurate. You just have to touch it a little bit. See, it jumps around a bit. But again, we'll set it to 0. Well, we'll turn the turn the gauge, turn the thing, set that to 0. Right. I'm sure they didn't mess about like this at British Leyland, they just banged them together. We lift it, and we see we need 7 thou again. Exactly 7. And you see how the gauge doesn't always go back, you have to sort of set the shaft back down again. There, you see. Because you have to remember with the main shaft, you've got the main shaft and the primary motion shaft. So you've got a bearing and primary motion bearing here and a bearing at the top. And when you move them, they can shift around a bit. So we've got 7 thou at the top, but let's check that again. Let's 0 at this. They're right funny about, aren't they? Dear me, very most frustrating. 7. Good. I shall write that down. Why did I write 8? 007. Next. Zoom that the wrong way, mate. Right, so what we're going to do next is bear in mind we need to add 7/1000 of an inch to each shim. Thus. And then it should be good. Now, the lay shaft, as I mentioned, we can have a tolerance of 1/1000 of an inch, which is why I measured it in thousandths of an inch. The main shaft is 0. Now, it's going to be tricky. You know, I always set them a little bit loose. Not too loose, but I err on the side of caution. If it's tight, I'd rather have it 1/1000 of an inch less than 1/1000 of an inch too much. Let's see what we've got. Just before I take the shim, this plate out, I don't know if you can see what 7 thou difference makes. You see the shaft's loose. Believe me, they've come in here running and nice and quiet, worse than that. But the lift is very, very small, so you really need a gauge to measure it. You can't sort of eyeball it. So I'm going to take this off and then we're going to measure the shims. The shim for the main shaft is 78, so plus 7 is 85. That was kind of easy to establish. Let's measure the small one for the lay shaft. The shim for the lay shaft is 76 plus 7. That takes us up to 83. Sorry. So that's what we want. Now we're looking for a shim 83 for the small one and 85 for the large shim. Let's have a look and see what we've got. Oh well. I managed to find the right shims. Isn't that strange, eh? So we've got a tiny bit in there. That's okay. I mean, it's not flopping about, but it's certainly not tight. You know, you can turn that okay. And the lay shaft, that's no problem. That's not tight at all. So I think we can continue now and put the back on. I think it's going to be good. That feels really nice. That's absolutely on the money. At least something's going right today.